Hi, everybody.
Greetings.
Greetings, Earthlings.
Greetings, Earthlings. Here we are.
At Clear Sky.
We have the younger generation and the somewhat older generation. So the older generation.
And the medium generation.
And the medium generation.
You mean I'm the younger generation?
Yes, I was referring to you as the younger generation.
The person helping
so
this video.
So the point that I'm actually making
younger.
is that the older generation is a little less comfortable in front of cameras and technology, and the younger generation, that would be you, is more comfortable in front of the camera. And so we're getting used to this new media delivery system, which of course is not new for lots of you, but there you go. We're going to live stream today about the difference or similarities between knowledge and experience, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes as everybody gets settled or arrives or whatever they do.
We are at the beautiful Clear Sky Retreat Center.
Spring is springing. It's
in the British
single digits.
Columbia Rockies.
Yeah, we'll be at 5 today and 15 or 16 in the next few days.
5 degrees centigrade. That's about, 40 degrees Fahrenheit?
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who are by system.
By system, plus or minus. And we're going to try to not swivel around too much because it's probably terribly distracting on the visual. But until we get started, we're going to swivel lots.
Lots.
Is that just to kind of get you all dizzy?
We'll be sharing today about the similarities and differences or different functions of knowledge and experience, particularly as those relate to spiritual practice and spiritual life. But a lot of it's true about life in general.
That's so very true. So we're just waiting for our MC to let us know that we can head off into the void of the mind to see what kind of strange thoughts arise in terms of experience and wisdom.
We've just started an insight meditation retreat here at Clear Sky. That's exciting. I have here with me an insight meditation master, Acharya Duncan. So it's exciting. It's been a little while since
we led an insight retreat.
We've done insight retreat. Would you say?
Yeah, I think so.
It feels like it's been. A while.
We've done its cousins like Mahamudra and Dzogchen and
even
Zen.
That's been a little while, hasn't it?
But that's been a while.
My point is that it's exciting to be
exciting.
Doing this kind of work again.
It is, and it's nice to always retouch every once in a while with the foundations of how consciousness works, and insight is what that's about. And of course, it's always fun to have bliss so that you can enjoy the insight. So
it's always fun to have bliss.
Bliss is good. So
when we talk about bliss, it's kind of a lot of the words in Buddhist practice are actually date back to early translations by Christian missionaries who went to the Himalayan kingdoms in the early 1900s. So
or 1800s.
May not be used to using words like bliss. So when we talk about bliss, we mean everything from the sensation of like a breeze blowing through the hairs on your skin, that kind of that exquisite tingle, or the feeling of sunlight on your face. Those are a couple of kinds of blisses. Or it could be an amazing meditation experience. It could be that experience of profound love when you're holding a newborn. These are all different kinds of bliss.
Actually, the text lists 16 different kinds of bliss, but we're not going to talk about bliss today, because today we're talking about knowledge and experience.
We have a hello from Greta from Edmonton. And
hi, Greta.
Jeff.
And Jeff. Hello,
Greta.
Edmonton.
Yeah. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Jeff.
There's a few other people online too, but we'll feel free to start.
Okay, so we're going to jump in. Today's Enlighten-Up telecast.
Livestream
is on the differences and similarities between knowledge and experience.
And their different functions. And
I'm going to kind of start off with a bit of a critique a little bit, and then Catherine is going to come in with some positives, and then I'll go to some positives, and hopefully by the end of this live stream we've kind of elaborated the subject somewhat. So I think the first thing we need to know is, or examine, is that our educational system and our training is mostly about knowledge. We learn to read and write information-based So as soon as we get into the school system, knowledge becomes generally way more important than experience. And kids learn very early, before grade 2, I'm told, to be very competitive. They know it's a competitive system, education, so they get very competitive about knowledge and information.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get rewarded. So most white-collar jobs have been considered, at least historically, better. And they tend to be information-based. And then more experiential jobs, right, like blue-collar jobs are considered
trades.
Lower.
Mm-hmm.
And so our society has been, and then with the internet, the society has all been bent towards more and more knowledge. But the difference between knowledge and experience is actually about the body. Because with experience, your body's involved. And with knowledge, it can just be in the head. So our education...
May I interject?
Yeah, of
related?
Course you can.
I don't want to...
Yeah, sure.
Make you forget, but I think we want to compare this to historically, almost every profession would have had a master and apprentice kind of model. So you would, if you wanted to learn to do something, whether it was blacksmithing or whether it was medicine, you would find someone who was good at what they did, and you would study under them and learn from them, and that would be a combination of knowledge and experience. Mm-hmm. And in some instances, this is still an important tradition today, and I think what Sensei is referring to is that in the standard education system, that experiential training can be lost, is often lost. And we happen to come from a Buddhist tradition that very highly values the master-apprentice relationship, which we also call the student-teacher relationship. And in this case, the teacher's job in large part is to make sure that the student gets the experiences they need to fill out their wisdom.
So following up on that point, or your idea that when it comes to teaching, for instance, meditation or something that is very much experientially based, one of the obstacles we run into with students is they think getting the knowledge or the information is the same thing as having the experience. And so what we're encouraging people to do is to take that wonderful knowledge, because knowledge helps you know what you're doing. Take that wonderful knowledge, but recognize that the experiential base is what integrates it, what brings it into play. And I think that's where the educational system leaves us a little blank, is that we think the information's enough. And we can understand why. TV, movies, the internet, it's all information-based. And getting out and doing physical practice involved, apprenticeship model is much, much more experiential-based. Then knowledge becomes very helpful.
Yes, right. The knowledge is helpful so that if we're going to travel to Istanbul, it's good to be armed with knowledge ahead of time so that when we arrive, we're somewhat prepared. We know where we're going. We know what language the people may speak. We know how to dress. And until we get there, we really have no idea, I mean, in the real sense of what it's going to be like.
So you could say in that sense, knowledge is a map.
Knowledge is a map.
It's a guide system. So for instance,
it helps with the experience. Yeah. Once you get there, I'm glad I knew not to wear short shorts in Istanbul.
Right. And in fact, we're just starting an insight retreat that Catherine mentioned earlier. And we start with the map. We start with the knowledge so that you have some idea where you're going. So the map is to get you to Mecca, but you actually got to go.
Actually got to go.
And that's the experiential part.
And you want to go.
And you want to go. And I think part of the problem with the internet is that even though you might be processing experiential information, it's in video or it's in images. It's not in your actual body being engaged. So with the map, you take the map and you can go to the meditation cushion and see how your experience lines up with that map. And so the map is to help you avoid pitfalls and sidetracks. But if you are on a sidetrack or a pitfall, the map helps you see that, and that's where that knowledge is so important.
That's right.
Brings you back on track.
That's right. And this is one of the reasons why there's just no substitute for meditation. Meditation is just, it's just absolutely unique because read about spiritual practice, we can read about the path of spiritual unfoldment, we can read about awakening, and it's when we actually meditate that the cosmic penny drops, where we realize, oh, this is what they're talking about. And then we know it to be true ourselves because we have experienced it with again, like Sensei said earlier, we've experienced with this body. So our organism, every cell of our body knows that experience is true, that what the teachings tell us about spiritual unfoldment, which is it's an innate kind of function of this human consciousness and this human organism. And with the meditation, not only the meditation, but meditation's key for us to really experience that is true. And that's exciting. That's meditation can be boring at times. Meditation can certainly seem boring, and sometimes it's really exciting.
Yeah,
You're just on that cushion going,
this also applies to, of course, relationships and raising children and human interactions. Yeah. That if it's information-based alone,
that's right,
we don't really learn how to raise children or communicate with each other or run marriages, because if all our systems are based on information, we're not prepared for the experiential interaction. And so in a sense, the apprentice-master model,
that's really true,
models the parental model, it models the marriage, it models the relationship, it models friendships, it models community. Learning to back and forth with others is experiential. It's not just information.
I have a good example of how our education system values knowledge over experience. I remember when I was about 12, my grandparents had their 50th or 60th wedding anniversary, and there was a big family reunion and there was a party, and as a 12-year-old I could not figure out why they were celebrating 50 years together. To me, that just represented that they had a kind of boring life. Isn't that sad? And now we have been together, we're not quite sure, I think it's 22 years.
21, I think.
We're not sure because 22. For some weird reason, maybe even 20. Though we're both good at math, we had our 20th anniversary, I think, 3 times.
Yeah, we're not even sure of the date. We go between May Day and Valentine's Day.
More than 20 years. And now I get, through that direct experience, why you would throw a big party, right? Yeah. Because it's a big achievement, it's a big accomplishment, and more to the point, it's because you have worked through a lot of things together and grown, both as individuals and as a relationship, that you're able to stay together that long.
Yep. Yes.
So I'll just let you know, we have a few people here. We have Greta, we have Zoe in England.
Zoe.
Julian.
Hey, Julian, hey. Australia.
We have Lisa Mitchell.
Hey, Lisa,
hey,
France.
Lisa.
Hey, we're...
No, Lisa Mitchell,
Lisa
Calgary.
Mitchell, Calgary. No, Red Deer, isn't it? Medicine Hat.
And Karen Scott from Fernie.
Hey, all right. Greetings. Karen. All right, so moving on with the experiential thing. The other aspect, of course, is that experiential wisdom is grounded in your body, whereas knowledge often is just in the head. So we mentioned this a bit earlier, that the need to bring the body into play is really important these days, where so many people are spending time on information-based systems like the internet, or in office jobs, or in jobs that are processing information. So what happens is that there's an insecurity in our confidence in our body, the more we put our security and our confidence in our mind. So in order to bring our confidence back into our bodies and our emotions, we need to unbalance the overweight of information and give more weight to physical sensation, tasting. And so in that sense, experience, in that sense, it's really wonderful to extend your range in terms of your diet and your experiences and so on, your romantic elaborations experientially, because it makes you smarter in the same way that more information makes you smarter. So if more information brings you better intelligence, then more bodily experiences, eating that kind of food or having that experience, jumping out of a plane, doing things you haven't done so much physically, with a parachute, especially if you want to do it again, is really helpful to integrate that body, mind, spirit thing.
Yes, and this is one of the reasons why something we undertake called the challenges is so powerful, because preference mind is a natural function of the ego, and of course it comes up, no, I don't feel like doing that, or ew, why would anybody eat that? And building on what Sensei was saying, the interesting thing is, why don't I want to do that? What would happen? Am I anticipating that something's going to happen, and will it actually happen if I do it? Or what does happen when I do it? That's taking the perceived knowledge. We think it's going to be a certain way, but building on that with actual experience. Actually go and find out what happens. And there's a tremendous amount of liberation waiting to happen in those kinds of scenarios.
Yeah. And there's a kind of hidden element in this one as well, which is a trust issue. We've been trained from early on to trust in information. Grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3 to grade 4 is all builds our trust and confidence in terms of our ability to learn or our stature in our communities. And it tends to be all information based. So we put an extra amount of trust in information and in knowledge, and then we tend to then not put that trust or confidence in experience, which is going to touch the body and the feelings. So we have this kind of insecurity or lack of trust often around feeling and body and that tactile experience, which is why we tend to repeat the same experiences over and over, because we don't have that confidence. Where we do have that confidence in intellectual knowledge, oh yeah, I can study that, or I'll find out about that. And so we really weight that more. So in a sense, what we're trying to address really, I think, is the imbalance of knowledge in our current situation compared to how much more strength and confidence we'd have and trust we'd have in life if we put more attention into experiential wisdom.
Yes, experiential wisdom. Absolutely. I came across something in a Dharma book some time ago. It said that there's this concept in Buddhist teaching called generating merit. It's one of the two accumulations. We can accumulate two things or grow two piles, we'll say, glorious piles. One is merit and one is wisdom. And accumulating merit, it's kind of similar to building maybe goodwill capital or social capital. It's those invisible things that are still worth a lot. Sometimes I think of it as accumulating good karma, in the karma bank. And what I found so interesting is that they said that that this text I was reading said that if we do not generate merit or accumulate merit, that we are actually unable to receive our guru's blessing. And I found that really fascinating so that was the knowledge. I read that in a book. We need to accumulate merit so that we can receive our guru's blessings in our minds. Interestingly, they were talking about it all happening in our minds. And having that knowledge then inspired me to, now I want to meditate on that and have that direct experience, because it's still a little esoteric for me to relate to. And I think I'm getting some connection.
And it goes back to a statement that our teacher made many, many years ago, and to me specifically, a long time ago, when I asked him if trust was awakening, and his response was, well, complete trust is complete awakening. And I think like I said earlier, I think our trust is in our minds and our intellectual abilities. Right. And our trust is not so much in our experiential experience, largely because it's the ego doesn't get to own that so much. The ego rides on information much more than it rides on experience. Now, if you do a physical career,
why is that? Do you think?
Well, I think because it's valued more and it's emphasized more in school. Now, you have people who are physical, experiential people, like carpenters or plumbers. And they have great confidence, massage therapists,
acupuncturists.
Yeah. And they have great confidence in their ability to do that. But it's only within that range, again, because of career channeling, it's only within the range of what they already do. So for instance, the massage therapist might have great confidence in their experiential wisdom with massage, but it doesn't necessarily translate over to all the things the body can do, right? Like art or music or meditation, for that matter. Whereas with the mind, if you can have confidence in the mind doing one thing, chances are you can have the confidence in the mind doing anything, because it's sort of the same tool. Whereas experiential is not just one tool, although it's one word. Experiential is like thousands of different aspects of experiential wisdom. And so it's a little less in the control of the ego, so the ego trusts it less.
Many different kinds of experience.
Yeah. And there's where the merit comes in, I think. Because if I learn to have experiential wisdom with cooking, and experiential wisdom with music, and experiential wisdom playing it, not listening to it, experiential wisdom with my hands, or experiential wisdom in terms of human relationships, being able to communicate with people, then the merit of that is that the integration of body and mind is much stronger and much clearer. And meditation puts them all together.
Body, mind,
and spirit.
And spirit. I'm wondering, questions are very welcome. If you have questions about knowledge and experience, or comments about how you've found the difference between them to touch you in your life, feel free to write those in the comments.
I think the other aspect too, in terms of a negative and a positive, is that if you get information wrong, you can go, oh yeah, that information's wrong, I can correct it. And yes, I think often your ego isn't particularly threatened by a correction of information. So Catherine, if I say, well, Canada has 9 provinces, and Catherine goes, no, there are 10. My ego can adopt that pretty quick because it's information and it's sort of external to my physiology. But if Catherine says, well, you put too much tarragon in the spaghetti sauce, but then somehow, because I did it physically, I'm more identified with it in a way than the knowledge, and therefore it's a bigger challenge to me to be corrected. So I think the other reason that we want to go to knowledge over experience is because the ego is less threatened by mistake, whereas in the learning of how to do something better physically challenges us more egotistically, I think.
With a mentor too, hey?
And a mentor acting as a guide or a master in relationship to that activity, because now I'm kind of in a parental dialogue with the master, whereas in information, like if Catherine's the teacher at the university, there's that parental dialogue is probably not there, or not as much anyway.
A bit less.
Yeah.
Right. So like I was touching on at the very beginning of this live stream, that is part of the role of the guru in a guru-student relationship, and also the Sangha, the community, to support this. But we support one another in having experiences that are going to help us develop as human beings and as unfolding spiritual beings. So that's a really valuable aspect of the relationship between teachers, students, and the community. The community is kind of cheers people on, or help give one another confidence if we're not feeling so confident ourselves. So I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's see. Of how we encourage one another to have more diverse experiences. I think we can all get comfortable with something that we're good at. It's natural to want to do something that we're good at. But then we can kind of get in put ourselves in a bit of a small box and not venture out to explore things that we may also be good at and don't know.
Well, travel would be good.
Travel's a great example. Yeah.
And also having multicultural or multiracial, multi-gendered friends. Mm-hmm. So the gated community is kind of, I think, has been developed for old people to feel safe. in troubled times. But the problem with the gated community is it's generally pretty homogenous. And that kind of really cuts down on our direct experiential wisdom. And so having friends from different classes of society, economics, education, culture, race, gender, vocations really helps with that. And again, we come back to the root issue for both knowledge and experiential understanding has to do with the ego's fragility or the ego's sensitivity to error, correction, or not knowing. And so the ego, by definition, is never comfortable not knowing, because the ego gets rewarded for knowing, whether that's information or experience. And I think it's easier for the ego to accept new information in its strengthening than it is for new experience, because new experience is challenging you at more levels. Kind of repeating a theme here.
Yeah.
But the idea being that if you can broaden your range of experience, you're actually also broadening the range of your knowledge.
That's right. It reminds me of the time when I was a university student. At that time, world history was basically Western European history and North American, well, U.S. history, being that I'm from the States. And I traveled to Europe, and it was... I kind of liked history, but actually being where the history took place made such a difference for me. It was so much more real and so much more relevant. And then in particular, I traveled to Istanbul, and I traveled there by myself as a young woman. And so there's that risk with experience. It was, it felt scary. I don't know how dangerous it was, but I felt vulnerable going there on my own. And it was so clear. The only thing I'd learned about Turkish history was the Turkish Empire kind of invading Europe and taking over Europe. And it was so obviously such a beautiful culture. When I actually was there, I was kind of astonished. Well, why didn't we learn all of the amazing things about the Ottoman Empire? We really kind of only learned about the threatening things. So that was a great example of taking a risk to have the direct experience. And it really opened my mind in a lot of ways to just be in the actual place. It was so clear that it was an advanced civilization. We didn't talk about that in history class. That wasn't part of the knowledge that was being transmitted. So and that's a great example of how travel can be such a profound experience.
And by association, then different types of people are bringing different experiences to the table. So we just returned from Mexico. So Mexico obviously is the travel bit. But we're also meeting people there that are living different kinds of experiences, from being a Mayan ruin travel guide for the sites, to a nature person who lives on the river and knows the plants and animals of the area, to cultural people at the festival we went to that are experiencing different things. So it's not just the travel itself or the information or the experiences or the people, but the combination of all these things feeding into your being to create change. So we can really tell the difference. For instance, another way is people living overseas. By living overseas, you get to step out of your culture and you get to have an experience from a different perspective. And after that, then you see your own nation much differently than you did if you never left. Now, not everybody can do that, but you can import it by having some Spanish friends or some Latin American friends.
The trip to Mexico, we took what Sensei is referring to. We went to a small local festival in a small town. And we went because we could. We were there during Carnival and wanted to take advantage of that. And we knew it would be a really unique experience. And what was so amazing, I think there were one or two other Caucasians there. All the other people I guess we're Mexicans. They
We
had
don't
masks
know.
on. We're not entirely sure.
The people not in the parade were Mexican for sure.
And what struck me so deeply was they were so hospitable. They welcomed us. They said, "Come, join in our parade. Dance with us, play music with us."
Drink.
Gave us drinks.
We're not sure what.
Played with us. Right. It was kind of homemade moonshine, and the hospitality was really quite moving. And what makes it even more moving is knowing that the U.S. and Canada are, I don't believe we're equally hospitable to Mexican people. So that's going to give me a lot to reflect on for a long time.
Cara, you had something?
Yeah, there's something from Zoe, and maybe elaborating on that, you could maybe speak to this theme related to community. But Zoe says here she's seeing the difference now between knowledge and action. And she's seeing patterns clearly, usually afterwards, not in the moment, if not in the moment, and now is needing to draw in action to change them. Right now she's seeing lots of interactional patterns, group dynamics.
Great.
And it's fine to discuss them, they can discuss them together, but the experience or the action is now or still needed to show they're actually changing the patterns.
Yeah. Good point. But again, it's that sense. You're fighting or you're wrestling with a lot of conditioning that says basically that from when you're 2, that's saying get that ego solid, stable, fixed, and secure. And we, like we said before, we add more information to kind of like get obese. We're kind of information obese, really.
Yeah.
And so then what happens is we lose our ability to be in touch with the give and take and the back and forth and the wrestle with another human being, which you get in the master-disciple-apprentice relationship. And we don't really do that. So we're out of touch. We're out of practice. We had our own bedrooms. We have our own phones. Everything is isolating. So it's that muscle's atrophied. And the only way to get that muscle back into gear is to put the device down and stand back from the books and the screens and like play music together, go on trips together, engage together physically.
Go punting together.
Or kicking footballs if you like. So the imperative or the direction for a greater integration would be, if you're information heavy, to make a discipline, a practice of taking X amount of time to where it is that you don't have that contact. So if it's interpersonal, then it would be something that involved community.
I think the great thing too, Zoe, about the situation you're describing, well, it's partly the challenge and the great thing is that we are really the only person that we can change. We're really not able to change another person. We can inspire other people to change, but we can't change them, and that can feel really challenging at times. We sometimes tend to think that other people need to change. That can happen.
Yeah, how many times have you been in a situation where you think your partner is the one that needs to change and you're okay where you are?
So, but the great thing is that if I change, everyone else around me has to change to adjust to that, right? So if you think of us all as a big puzzle and we're all pieces in that puzzle. So if I change my shape, and our shape is malleable, then everybody else is going to change their shape too.
We also have a bit of a big fear here because in the end, knowledge, whether it's experiential or informational, rests on the fact that in order to learn anything, we have to embrace unknowing. And too often with information, we're not embracing unknowing to learn something more informationally. We're adding it on top of what we already know. But to learn to do something experientially, in order to do something new, you have to acknowledge the unknowing that is there in order to learn that. And that is something we're not rewarded for in our society, for the unknowing. And so it's a very strange selling technique to tell you that if you want to be wiser, if you want to be more integrated in terms of experience and information, you have to embrace unknowing. It's not a I can't marketing this is going to be a little difficult, but Cara and Catherine and Planet Dharma team will figure out how to do it, and maybe I'll have some ideas. Did you have something else on that?
Yeah, Lisa Mitchell says, "Wow, I'm totally a beast with information."
Yeah.
I feel that. Perfect timing.
Yeah. Well, you know, the whole culture, everything. I mean, the internet, the social media is like, it's just information, and there's a kind of indigestion.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that, go ahead.
Ma'am, back to Zoe's point. I was still going on that. Zoe, the cool thing is it's really amazing since you're the only one that you can change, it's amazing to take on that responsibility and change oneself even just a little, and just watch. Everyone is kind of, you know, maybe a little surprised, maybe a little startled, but kind of excited because it's fresh. And if you can change, I can change. And now we're all different, and ooh, you know, what's going to happen next? That unknowing can be really exciting too, and fun.
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah, I just personally, I want to say, Zoe says, "Yay to unknowing."
Well, at least from the safety of behind the computer screen where we are now. But yeah, you've proven yourself many times, Zoe, of your willingness to experience the unknowing.
And it's liberating. It can feel stressful at times, and it can feel great at times.
Yeah. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to add a comment about what you're saying about the mind versus the body, and how based in the mind we are. And I'm even thinking like it's really a matter of insecurity and trust. So for example, in say Chinese medicine or acupuncture, we are taught in a mind-based system, right? So sometimes, like now, most acupuncturists, we won't even really look at someone's body very well, or we won't really touch the body, or we're not thinking of like energetics or tapping into other sources of experience or information that the body's giving us. We're just using book learning in our heads and trying to help people with their health, which seems totally off.
Yeah.
And so I guess maybe I think the same too, maybe with spiritual teachings. There's a lot of information-based teaching, and sometimes I even feel like I dismiss the in-person teaching because it's less obvious or less tangible. So can you speak at all to that?
The in-person teachings are less obvious and less tangible?
Yeah, when it's not verbal or it's not...
Well, I'd like to take a run at that if you don't mind. We've come to the place where fame equals success, and therefore, if I'm famous, I'm successful. If I'm talking,
or if you're famous, you're good at what you do.
Yeah, and if I'm famous and I'm talking to you, and you don't feel famous, then you won't see me as famous, because if I was famous, why would I be talking to you? So fame now becomes a platform of public appearance, right? I'm famous as a dead thing, like not live. Right? But if I'm live and I'm talking to you and you're not famous, I can't possibly be famous, because if I was famous, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be talking to everybody else. So on the basis of this information thing with fame, right? Fame now, or famous or successful now, is being abstracted from a human contact, person to person. And so this idea that a tactile, emotional, experiential relationship it doesn't have to be famous to be successful. It just has to be, how real is it? And we've learned to undermine that or undervalue that, and that's back to that master role.
Back to that what?
Back to that disciple master idea.
The master apprentice.
Master apprentice
idea. If I can give an example of what Sensei's talking about, the light bulb kind of went on over our heads once we were having lunch, and got talking to our server, who was really friendly, and she told us that she was going to move to Japan in a few months. And we said, we lived in Japan for a long time. And she said, yeah, I'm really excited to go to Japan. And she kept talking about herself and her plans, and which is natural. She was excited. And then we were struck that she never asked us about our experiences in Japan, or if we had any suggestions, or it didn't get to that point. Here's where I'm planning to go. Do you know anything about that place? And I think we weren't giving her a cell, right? All we said was we lived there for a long time. And I think that's partly what Sensei is referring to, not to put words in your mouth, but because we didn't have the marketing, we are the Japan experts, which in some senses we are. But because we didn't do that, she figured we
20 years
maybe
and
didn't,
10 years, 30 years between us.
Figured we didn't really know all that much, and she could find it out online, I guess.
Or if we were experts in Japan, we should be somewhere else other than across the table from her talking to it. That's that abstraction thing. And that's partly the problem with our Western cultural conditioning and our educational system. Our whole system is built on Aristotle and Plato and the Greeks. And that tendency to see the idea and the theory as being more important than the experience. And obviously there are areas where that's not true, like in sports and so on. But when it comes to presenting ourselves to another person, it's much easier for me to go in information heavy to talk to Kara and rely on that as my credentials than to kind of go in and say, well, Kara, I've been doing massage therapy for 45 years and I'm really good at massage. And she goes, well, I'm not into massage, goodbye. But if I have a whole bunch of information, then I get more creds at the table. I get more stature. And self-image, coming back to the ego, is very much built on, if not information directly, if it's experiential, videos I have about myself in that experience that becomes information. So say I'm a dancer, I would say I'm a famous dancer, but if you meet me, I'm just a body, right? But if I have like videos and brochures and pamphlets and information about being a famous dancer, then my stature goes up. Because Catherine and I didn't have like a suitcase full of, here's me talking to the president of Japan, here's me, on TV in Japan, doesn't rate.
Let's see, I'd like to share a parable from the Buddhist tradition. The great saint, well, he became a great saint. He wasn't a great saint yet. Naropa, he was an abbot at Nalanda University in India. And that's kind of the equivalent of, being a dean at an Ivy League university or something. And he was very learned in Buddhist philosophy and practice. And an ugly old woman came up to him one day and said, all these scriptures you're studying, do you know the words or do you know their meaning? Do you understand the meaning of the words or do you understand their deeper meaning? And he said, I understand the meaning of the words. And she got this big smile on her face and she laughed and she kind of did a little happy dance. And Naropa was so struck by her response that he wanted to make her more happy. And he said, and I also understand their deeper meaning. And then she started crying and wailing and threw herself on the ground and was hitting her fists on the ground. And he said, what happened? And she said, well, I didn't know that someone as high as yourself would lie like that. I was so happy the first time because you were telling the truth, and I'm so upset because you're lying to me about really understanding the meaning. So there's the difference between knowledge and experience.
Here's the power of a being moving to wisdom. So Naropa took that experience and he said, you know what, you're right. Now, how many times do you do that in your life? How many times when you're challenged on something, you go, you know what, you're right about that. Anyway, he did. And he retired from the university. He left. He walked out. And he went and he looked for years and years. I don't know how many, 5 years maybe. He went looking for the apprentice-master relationship, his guru.
It was actually the woman's brother. He said, how do I find out the deeper meaning? And, like Sensei said, who does that, right? Yeah.
So
she said, go study with my brother, Tilopa.
Was it her brother?
Yeah, it was
I didn't know that. Yes. So anyway, he looked for Tilopa for a while. It took a while. And when he found Tilopa, it did not look like anybody he wanted to study with. And the problem or the power of the master-apprentice relationship is that if you're the apprentice and you have an idea what you want from that master is never, ever going to look like you actually want him to look like, so that you can enhance your apprentice ego in order to have the master that looks good. So for instance, if you wanted to have the master as the Dalai Lama,
might look like a woman.
yeah,
for
whoa,
example.
yeah, scary, or something. But if you, for instance, you think, oh, I'll go study with the Dalai Lama, you probably are not going to be in a master-student relationship with this, because the Dalai Lama, it doesn't do that work. He farms it out to his other Rinpoches to do that work. So if you did do that master-disciple relationship, you might get this old woman with buck teeth and crazy hair that the Dalai Lama specifically sent you to, because she doesn't match your image of what she should appear on the internet as being famous.
As being a great,
Case in point.
As being a great guru.
And Talopa was exactly like that.
Was he the fish gut eater?
He was the raw fish gut eater and a ferry boat.
This is in a era when it was considered unclean to handle animal offal, animal guts, and so on. So yeah, it was like apprenticing yourself to a manure raker.
So you see this again in an example where
It's
one
on
of
my
our
mind this morning.
one of our students went to learn ceramic, pottery, skill, trade, craft in Japan, and she spent the first year just having her hands in freezing cold water in the winter molding clay
kneading the clay
before she ever got to study ceramics. And so this ancient tradition is slow.
Japan
And
is good at that, at honoring that. They make you do the most menial things for the first year or 2 or 3, just to make sure you're serious,
Right.
and to build character.
Yeah. So we hit another button here is speed. We have a very fast culture, and information is very fastly adopted, but experience is slow.
That's true.
And so people want to skip the slow bit to get to the end, which is another problem with that system.
Yeah, experience takes time, and thank heavens for that, right? That's things that are valuable take time.
Great. Thank you. Well, we're pretty much at time. So
Oh,
if there's anything else
okay.
you want to say?
No, I think I've said what I need to say.
Well, knowledge is super useful. It can, as Sensei mentioned in the beginning, it's like a map. We want to know where we're going. When we get there, we want to be able to recognize the signs. And there's just no substitute for experience. So it's really valuable to know the difference.
I think one thing
And know when one is in play and when the other is in play.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd add is that the tendency in our culture, I think, is information first, experience second. And I think it actually works better if you do experience first and then get the information. There is also a place for doing them at the same time, where you have information and experience and information. And I think maybe that's the best system. What do you think?
Well, I think I wish everybody much direct experience of spiritual unfolding. You'll recognize it when you experience it.
And you must be patient, because experience takes time.
May
All
all
right,
our
may
efforts benefit all beings.
And nice seeing you all, sort of. Seeing us anyway. And we'll see you in a month.
Have a beautiful day.
Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
See you.
See you.